case we want. Okay. So I forgot what I was saying just then. So there wasn't really like a data science academic major. And so when I came through school, I'm not going to let you know how old I am there. But when I came through school, we were still majoring in things like electrical engineering and computer science. And we were kind of assembling our statistical and computer programming and tool sets like that through the majors that we had. And so when I came through school as a biomedical and electrical engineer. So when I learned about some of the domains of data science, I learned about them in specific ways. So for example, when I learned how to program, I learned how to program using MATLAB and Java and C++ and C. So I came from embedded systems. And so I ended up really, really loving C. Like I weirdly love like assembly a little bit, not gonna lie. It's very weird, but I really love like this really intense structure of it, that things have to be like specified so clearly and there's like not this flexibility. I love just the little minute amount of flexibility you get once you factor in the object-oriented programming when it comes to C and C++. MATLAB became my best friend on earth during my PhD. I loved it up and down. It was so great because it did have a certain kind of flexibility, but at the same time, it allowed you to really focus on the underlying mathematics, which was really great. It's something that I loved. So with that, I also got a lot of experience with specific IDEs and I fell in love with specific things that I loved about them. So I learned a lot and I programmed a lot in Visual Studio. Do you guys, how many of you have experience with something like Visual Studio or an IDE like MATLAB or Spider? Just go ahead and give me a thumbs up so I can know where you're coming from. All right, let's see. Oh, I can't really see. I can't see the participant totals anymore.
So yep, there are 15, 16, 17 people who have had that experience.
Okay. Okay, so we have a lot of, you know, traditional IDEs. Okay, that sounds great. So that's what I really came from. So with those, you have a fantastic debugger usually. Oh my goodness, I love MATLAB's debugger. And you have, you know, and I also love Visual Studio's debugger, and you have like these REPLs, right? So you're able to, you know, get in this debugging stage, explore your variables. You also in general just have the variable explorer, like these things are just so lovely, okay? Then I decided, okay, I have all these different areas of expertise. So I know a lot about programming. I know a lot about machine learning. Like all of my academic coursework and my degrees have been about these things. So I think data science is really what I'm supposed to be doing. So then I was like, well, let me learn the tool set a little bit better. And so here came Jupyter Notebooks, right? Okay. How many people have actually used Jupyter Notebooks already? How many people are familiar? Just give me a thumbs up. And about how many people is that? Oh, I think you're muted, Jesse, sorry.
25, 26, so let's call it 27.
Okay, so we've used Jupyter Notebooks before, fantastic. All right, so the Jupyter Notebooks are just a little bit different than our traditional IDEs, okay? So let's just get into that a little bit. And so I'm gonna go ahead and start, let's see, so bear with me. This is where my Zoom issues begin, okay? So let's see, let's try to, okay, there we go. All right, I'm gonna try to share the screen. Oh, and I think it says host disabled participant screen sharing for me.
Interesting. You should be set.
Okay, let's see. Oh, we'll try one more time. Oh, it's still saying that. Oh, I think we're almost there. All right, good, we made it. All right, let's see slideshow. All right, is everyone able to see this slideshow? Okay, it should be some deer here, deer-like antelope creatures fighting. Okay, fantastic. So the reason, like one of my favorite things is to pick like the first, you know, introductory slide image. And I picked these antelope or whatever creatures they are and they're fighting. Why? This is how I felt working with Jupyter Notebooks when I first started them. So coming from Visual Studio, coming from MATLAB, having these, coming even from Spider, okay, having these really strong IDEs in which to code, going to Jupyter Notebooks was a legitimate battle for me. Okay, so me and Jupyter Notebooks have had some very impolite words with each other over time. Okay, but we made some progress, so we're going to talk about that today. So as we said, you know, with our traditional programming techniques, and as you guys said, I think about half of you have used these traditional IDEs, we tend to be thinking about specific objectives and purposes, especially when we're doing software development in particular. We have specific sets of IDEs that we traditionally use, and we tend to write things like comments. We use debuggers and these REPLs that allow us to investigate states of our code while we are coding, okay? So on the other hand, we have Jupyter Notebooks, which have a little bit of a different paradigm, and they have a little bit of a different purpose. So they're really more about being able to document your exploration as you're going through your data science activity. So this is just a little bit different than software development. And yet there are people that actually develop software in Jupyter Notebooks, which we'll get to in a moment. But again, it's more about this literate programming, being able to explain why you've done the things that you've done, being able to put in images, being able to put in media, doing exploratory programming. So, you know, maybe you're not executing every single line in order. Maybe you are kind of exploring what the impact of this specific approach is, or this other approach is. Maybe it's not just this linear fashion. Of course, it still does have the regular coding aspect, right? So you do have to still write code within these Jupyter Notebooks as you are trying to also explain and explore your space of data science, okay? So because of that, we know that there are some advantages then to using Jupyter Notebooks, and people have told us, and there's writing and explanation all about why we want to use these Jupyter Notebooks. You know, when you are a beginner, like it seems like every single exploration is like talking about Jupyter Notebooks. Like use Jupyter Notebooks, use this like start from Anaconda, just run Jupyter Lab. That's all you have to do. Okay, that's what everyone starts with. So we have it kind of hammered into us that we should be using Jupyter Notebooks for data science. So I started with this, as I said before, and I found that I really struggled. I struggled non-trivially. And so for a quick moment, before we jump into some things about maybe how I resolve my struggles, I'd like to know a little bit about your struggles. So what we're going to do is we're going to split up into just random breakout groups. And something that I found is it really is great to be able to talk a little bit with the people in your breakout room to find out who everyone is. It's a great time for community building. So make sure to know who else is in your breakout room. But during that time, it would the goal is to discuss the challenges that you faced using Jupyter Notebooks, but also what it is that you really love about Jupyter Notebooks. And so we have a document that you can, you know, write down what your group has decided on or talked about in terms of these challenges or these things that you like. And Umang or Jesse, would you guys mind sending out the link for the report out? I think I might, let me see if I can grab it. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you. All right, so that'll be the document that you'll use, and your group number will be indicated by your breakout room. The way that you're going to join the breakout room is at the bottom of the screen. There should just be like this little icon, like it's a set of 4 little boxes. Oh, you need access.
Erlica ended up in a room all by herself. So I'm going to go ahead and move her to room 10.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'm not sure that everyone has access to this. Let's see. I might have just failed in that respect. Anyone with the link? Okay, there we go.
Okay, do I need to, okay, so anyone with the link, do I need to send it out again? Link disappeared, okay. I'm gonna,
This one?
I go ahead and close all rooms, bring people in, send it in the chat again, and then send them back out?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay. Hey there, folks. Sorry to yank you back out of the rooms, but we wanted to give you all a different link. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to send you all back to the rooms in just a moment. And I think what we'll need to do is to share that link as soon as everyone's back in here, which should be in about 4 seconds.
Okay. And then if someone wouldn't mind, go ahead and clicking on that link and just confirm that you're able to access it right away.
So I yanked everyone back from the room so we can send you all the new link. Go ahead and click on the link, make sure that you do have access, and I'll open those rooms right back up again.
So if you're able to access, just, okay, it works great. All right.
Fantastic. I'm going to open up the rooms again. I'm going to go ahead and reduce that time just a little bit to 7 minutes. And the rooms are opening back up now. Okay. Looks like every room has some Mahmoud. I'm going to send you to room 6. Okay. So Farron, do you need some help, Farron? They still need edit access.
Here, let me just send it one more time. I'm going to send it like that. I'm going to send it like this.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have looked at that a little bit more. Now, I don't know if they can, okay, yeah. I don't know if you're in the rooms, if you get the chat.
Okay, it looks like people did. It looks like people did because I see people.
Okay, great. Okay, they got it. Okay, great.
Man. I just really didn't even, oh. All right, Farron, tell us what the confusion is.
And here, let me go and let you unmute yourself. Yeah, you can unmute yourself, Farron.
The change of space. So what you're doing is you're going into something called a breakout room, which is a subgroup of other people. And you'll be able to talk with other people about maybe the issues that you've had with Jupyter Notebooks, and then input those things on the Google Doc that we sent, which is this. Are you able to go? Are you assigned to a breakout room? Because what you can do is go on to the bottom of the screen where it says breakout rooms, and it's like a set of 4 squares, and just click on that and click join.
Excellent.
And we can also just, you might have accidentally come out, so you might have to go back in. Okay, great.
And Reliance, do you need to be assisted to get into your room? So Farron and Reliance, if you have your mouse hover a little bit closer to the bottom of the screen where you're seeing our videos, you should see an indicator of Breakout Room, and you can join the Breakout Room by clicking on that. Hello, Andre. We are in breakout rooms right now, sharing pain points with Python Jupyter notebooks. We have about another minute. I'm going to go ahead and invite you into one of the rooms, and you can join in the conversation there. We'll be coming back in just over a minute.
Thank you for handling these breakout rooms, Jesse. I really appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. It looks like a lot of people, okay. Interesting. These are interesting.
Okay. Group 7, got it.
That's so interesting. This is so interesting. People have some, we're going to have a good Q&A session. I might have to try to make time for that because some issues here are very interesting.
Yeah. Rooms will be closing in about 50 seconds. Yep, another GitHub and merge conflicts. Okay, now they're getting the 30-second warning for the room's closing. Oh, and Farron, I'm sorry, I just saw your note. But it's moot because they're all closing. Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome back. Looks like we're making our way back. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you guys on video. I love that. Oh, hi, friend. I see a friend there.
Peter, and yeah, good to see you, Marcus. Hello.
We have a lot of friends here.
Yeah.
Oh, great to see you guys. Let's see. All right, so someone asked, will this recording be shared? So the default answer is yes. I will be very honest with you. I'm a very honest I'm like a very goofy presenter, and it makes me like super awkward about sharing my videos. I just get really goofy because I love to like talk to people and interact. I don't know how that comes across if you don't know me, so it makes me like nervous to share it sometimes, but it's okay, we'll see. But the default answer is yes there. All right, fantastic. So now that everyone is back, okay, is there anyone who has like serious gripes with Jupyter notebooks or serious loves about Jupyter notebooks that they'd like to share for maybe a minute? Anyone in particular?
I just want to start off saying I like your presentation style. I think you just seem super like excited and friendly and like it's very engaging. Some people when they present tech want to be super serious and they think you like if you're more serious, you're more like respectable or like they like almost like more skilled is how they think of it. But I don't know. I don't like dry presentations. I think this is great so far.
Thank you so much for saying that. Like it's an insecurity of mine, but I love like workshops and interactions. So thank you for saying that.
Oh, I'm the same way. I've presented a few tech talks and I worry about it, but I always get good feedback afterwards that it wasn't boring. So
Fantastic. You're so encouraging. Thank you. Well, let's see. Would you like to share anything about love or hate about Jupyter Notebooks? And don't be afraid to talk about if you just have pure hatred, because like you're going to see a slide where I just express all my hatred that I had for Jupyter Notebooks. So anyone, feel free.
I can go, I guess. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say that I think the one thing that came up was installing packages. Sometimes, depending on how you installed the notebook system, figuring out how and where to do that has been a challenge sometimes.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I kind of moved to Google Colab pretty quickly because of the shareability. So, but on pure Jupyter Notebooks, it ends up being a pain to collaborate with people. You're just sending notebooks back and forth, and it's like, yeah, it's hard to work on your own little sections the way it's laid out.
Absolutely. I could not possibly agree more. Anyone else?
I'm with you, Kate. I actually don't have any experience working with Jupyter Notebook. I started with Collab, and that's what I've stuck with over the last couple of years. So I like the shareability, as you mentioned. So so it's exciting to know what other people are, what other tools or technology people are using. So that's my bit.
Yeah, gotcha. Thanks for responding. I heard someone else wanted to say something as well.
And I think it was Ida.
Ida?
Yes. So I work in a lab. I do data analysis, and I mostly use Stata and R. And my colleague, I think she's in a call. She just started using Jupyter Notebooks, and she just calls us ancient now. And she was just trying to make all of us get into it. Aisha, if you're in the call, say something. That's all I wanted to say. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Gotcha. Well, let me share a little bit, not a little bit, but actually a lot about the things that really just galled me about Jupyter Notebook. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so here we go. Hang in there with me one more time. Let's see if we can make it. All right, let me share. Okay. Okay, looks like we're good there, and we're going to share this. Right, great. Right, and can you see? Okay, you can see okay, great. All right. So also, let me just see right quick if I can move this panel somewhere else. It's so annoying. I don't know if you can see it or not.
No.
Okay. All right. So let's see. So we talked a little bit about our Jupyter Notebook struggles. So as it were, especially a couple years ago, there were a lot of people who truly, truly hated Jupyter Notebooks. And you're going to see a lot of things on Reddit here because I used to spend, and I also still do, a lot of time on Reddit. And I used to just go through these articles and just laugh hysterically about how much people really, really hated Jupyter Notebooks. I mean, even when I look at the titles of them, like there's so much wrath just in the title about Jupyter Notebooks, like 5 reasons why Jupyter Notebooks suck. Is it only me that thinks Jupyter is horrible? Like these people are just like belligerent when it comes to Jupyter Notebooks. This thing that you see back here, and I will actually share some of these things because they're just so funny, but they're true, especially at that time. This is a whole presentation during JupyterCon about someone who truly, I mean, just hated notebooks up and down, just disliked it. And I really understood it. I hated notebooks so much, I almost felt like I just couldn't even identify with anyone who would want to use Jupyter Notebooks. I just didn't respect it at all, and I thought they were awful. So that seems very strong, but I'm going to tell you why that is, why I felt that way. All right. So first of all, some people have named this specific issue. So this JSON file format. So I don't have beef with the file format itself. It makes sense to me why it is that way. The problem is if you go to try to like share it and there's no rendering that sits behind this, all you see is JSON. So you can't actually get to the literate programming part. You can't actually get to like the visualization and the coding part because you're physically wading through JSON. So that makes it really hard for version or for sharing, but also when it comes to versioning, and I see someone wrote this in the pain points, like if you get a merge conflict with someone when you're trying to like merge things into a Jupyter notebook, or when you're trying to do versioning, it's awful. And it's awful for many reasons. The most potent being the merge conflict tends to be inserted into the JSON. So not only is it JSON that you're looking at, your actual notebook is broken because your JSON is broken. So even if you do have a renderer to see this notebook, you would not be able to open it and see the location of the error. So this is such a struggle. Like I could understand why anyone would be using this. Let's see, also in terms of reproducibility. So a lot of people brought this up. So also the things that I'm bringing up are the things that other people wrote about in their articles. In terms of reproducibility, I moderately dislike the out of order execution. When I went through school for software engineering, it was about iteration and exploring like a space a little bit. And so that wasn't like, you don't really do it the same way, but there was a sense of like doing something again and again before doing the next thing. So that didn't bother me so much. But when it came to like scientific papers and things like that, I did start to see where the out of order execution could start to be an issue when it comes to reproducibility. Also that back in kernel state. So when you start to modify things in a Jupyter notebook, it's modifying like these variables that are in the kernel. And so it's hard to see them without a variable explorer. So you don't actually know it's changing, you just know that it has. What else did I hate? Teaching coding in Jupyter notebooks. I found this to be a real challenge. So not teaching something like pandas, for example, not teaching how to use pandas or how to use like a package, but teaching like fundamental programming, like what is a for loop. I found this to be very, very difficult using Jupyter notebooks. Why? Because things want to execute by cell as opposed to executing by line. So now how do you show someone how a line of a for loop executes and how things iterate through a for loop or a while loop, or when they stop executing if you can't go through the line of a cell? So I found that to be very unpleasant and irritating. But as I told you before, I'm a person that I really love order, structure, love it, okay? So what really galled me to no end is the software engineering aspect, okay? So what do I mean by that? So I felt very strongly that Jupyter notebooks encouraged poor like software development practices. What do I mean by that? So when I took my software engineering class, clearly I feel like I'm a software developer because I took this one class. Okay, it's not true. But I feel very strongly about there's some things that we should take from software engineering that make for good code, okay? So things like code smells, like weird things that are going on and you kind of feel they like kind of waft towards you. You can see it going on, like having these global variables being used, or even variables that are just in the kernel and you use them within functions without passing them in, terrible. People do that a lot in this code. And then spaghetti code that really, it just like the littlest thing and it falls apart. I couldn't stand it. What else? I'm like getting upset as I'm talking about this because it's just bringing me back. So I also disliked the length of Jupyter notebooks. You'll find that I generally do not like long documents. I like things like books, right? So you have a book. What is it? It's divided into chapters, and chapters are divided into pages. You turn the page after you're done with some chunk, right? Even with scientific papers, it's not all one big like slab, like it is on separate pages, number one, but two, things have like section headers and it's different things. I hate long code. Can't stand it. Can't deal with it. You can't even point 2 and 3 of poor modularity. So, and poor code reusability. It's hard to use what's in one notebook and another notebook. Like you can't, like you would have to import like the whole, at that time, you would have to import the whole notebook and run it beforehand. And then now it's like you have this big notebook and it would have executed themselves. And it's just, no, like it's not a great way to do software engineering. It's just not good. It's hard to maintain, it's too long. You can't reuse pieces of it. And it's just like a repeated analysis, a lot of copy and paste. I also felt so strongly when I learned to program, I love the debugger. Like I love the debugger and I love the variable explorer so passionately. Like these are parts of like my favorite parts of IDEs. And the fact that Jupyter Notebooks did not like have a debugger, like you couldn't stop in the code and explore the variables, that there was no variable explorer in general, and that you couldn't run line by line. I felt like that was absolutely awful. And then again, you know, software engineering in the out of order execution, meaning that if you have a bunch of cells, you can run the first cell, the fourth cell, and then come back and run the first cell and get a different answer. And then you don't actually update this other cell. And so it's incorrect if you were to just look at it. And so again, that leads to issues of reproducibility. So talking about this, so I know I have seen some tweets about how how data scientists should feel about software engineering. So I know I'm talking about this at length, but my general feeling is that when you have a language and you have a platform or some kind of clay or some kind of material that you're using to craft this thing, you have to be good at actually using the thing. So for example, like, what if you were a Spanish speaker, okay, and you have no grasp of grammar, of Spanish grammar, none. So if you were going to try to write a book in Spanish, for example, if you're going to try to do a software engineering task in the Spanish language of writing like a book with a plot, that would be terrible. And because you don't know the grammar of Spanish. On top of that, maybe you don't know like how a book should be organized. Like you might not know, like maybe you want to start with some sort of introduction, and then you want to go into character exposition, and then you want to introduce like the challenges, and you don't know the structure of how you don't know how to write a story. So actually that same thing happens with Jupyter Notebooks. So the goal is to express something, but if you don't know like the language of how to use a Jupyter Notebook, if you don't know that you need to be able to express things in a certain way using Jupyter Notebooks, it will fall flat regardless. You will never be able to use this platform or this modality or this clay to craft your analysis or craft your result in such a way that people will be able to understand it and appreciate it. So in conclusion, I hated Jupyter Notebooks because actually I don't really think I knew how to use them well. Okay, so I had all this beef. I was actually not going to use Jupyter Notebooks anymore. I had moved on back to using Spider because you can do like kind of chunk-wise execution. And I was like, oh, well, do you really need the markdown? Like you can just use comments. So I had kind of given up on Jupyter Notebooks. But then something interesting happened. Sorry, I'm like taking up all the time. We have things to do. So we're going to get through this kind of quick. All right, so then something interesting happened. And I happened to stumble on this O'Reilly blog, right? And it started talking about Netflix. And Netflix had this line here where they talk about, literally look at this. It says, why we find Jupyter Notebooks so compelling. Netflix, the Netflix. So I had to question myself. I'm like, I'm not really anybody. And I'm like saying that Jupyter Notebooks are awful. And here we have Netflix saying that Jupyter Notebooks are amazing. Maybe I need to take a second look. Then we also had this really like prodigious researcher who made this a fantastic platform for people who really wanted to get into deep learning, but didn't have strong programming or data science backgrounds. And he like loves Jupyter Notebooks. He developed like this whole package of Jupyter Notebooks, and he was so passionate about it. His name is Jeremy Howard. So I really just had to question myself about my feelings towards Jupyter Notebooks. Okay, so I started looking and I was like, all right, I started seeing maybe where the problems were mine and other people's versus the actual problem of the platform itself. The problem of, so not knowing Spanish well enough to write a grammatical story, or not knowing how to organize a story well enough to tell it. Like, maybe the problems are mine, maybe the problems are ours. And I found, like I said, Reddit, love it. Someone really just nailed it, what's going on with Jupyter Notebooks and why people feel the way that they do about it. And a lot of it actually has to do that with the fact that Jupyter is not actually producing like bad code. And I don't really feel that it encourages poor software practices, because the same things that you can do in Jupyter, you can do in Python, you can do in Spider, you can do in other languages, you can do in Visual Studio, you can do it a lot of places. So if you don't adhere to these practices of software engineering, you will make bad code, you will have bad habits, and you will make this unmaintainable code. So it will be your fault in some respects. Sometimes there are parts of the tools that fail you, but a lot of times it is a failure to be able to adequately use the tools, okay? So I love how this person expressed that. And I think these particular problems are addressed specifically by great software engineering practices. As well as this. So you have to be able to use the tool. If you do out of order execution, you can always just restart the kernel and execute it top to bottom and see how your code is working. I mean, it doesn't seem all that difficult. So what's the second piece? Sometimes there are cases where you're trying to use a Jupyter Notebook for maybe something you shouldn't be. So you're trying to fit this square peg into a round hole. Now, when it comes down to teaching coding, I still have some feelings about that. But there are ways to get around that as well. So let's look into that a little bit. So lesson 1 on how we're going to make Jupyter Notebooks work for us. What is that? We are going to start off. We are going to address every single one of these problems by using good software engineering principles. Okay. What kind of principles can help us here? Many. Okay. Let's just discuss a few. So very quickly, this is not a course on software engineering, but these are some things that I always try to carry with me when I am writing code, data science code. Okay, the code is the language. Okay, so we still have to be good at the language itself. And we need to know how to write stories with our language, like software engineering, to be able to deliver good stories. Okay, good analysis. So one great principle that I love, also this is from the book called Code Complete by Microsoft, by a guy named Steve McConnell. This is the book that I learned software engineering from, but I'm sure there are better ones. So if you have any ideas about that, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. Also, you can write it in this Google Doc. That would be really interesting. Anyways, neither here nor there. But in terms of this minimal complexity, so I think it's a big deal that you really don't have to make overly clever designs, especially in data science. So sometimes if you write code that is like extremely short and clever, like it's wonderful because yeah, it is short and clever, but the next person that comes behind you, like they have no idea what you've written and it makes no sense. So that's not helpful for the next person. It's not helpful for anyone who's reading your code. It's not helpful for anyone who wants it's not helpful for anyone who wants to reproduce your code. Of course, that's a little bit different if you're writing like optimizations and things like that. But in general, I think minimal complexity is a great principle to stick with. Secondly, we have something called ease of maintenance. It ties right in. Let's see if we can update this. Okay, ease of maintenance, meaning if you're going to pass your code to someone else, how easy is it going to be for them to understand what you've done or maintain it? So something that I've seen recently, and it's as simple as this, we had a collaborator who used very unusual indentation strategies. Okay, so that doesn't seem like it's a big deal. But when it comes down to maintainability, now all of your time is actually taken by just trying to maintain this indentation instead of actually doing your analysis. So just small things like that, but also in terms of, again, the kind of code that you write in terms of simplicity. Another thing is called loose coupling. This is something that is very strongly related to modularity, meaning that the connections between different parts of your code, like very strong connections, need to be kind of loose. And what that kind of refers to is the fact that you don't want to use like these kernel variables that you don't pass into your functions within the functions. Like it's terrible. And encapsulation and the principles of software engineering can help you with this. And so I know Again, we're talking a lot about software engineering, but this is the substrate upon which our data science analysis is performed. So it's going to help us. Also extensibility. So that's about enhancing your system without interrupting the underlying structure. So this happens to us a lot when we're collaborating and moving ideas forward and iterating. If you change the structure of your functions or something like that, sometimes it breaks like a version that someone else is working on, or it's not backward compatible anymore. Something you need to watch out for. But again, with data science, I don't know, it kind of gets on, depends how much collaboration you're doing and what your goal of your analysis for your modeling is. In terms of reusability, okay, this is a big one, and we're going to talk about this. So reusability is meaning that you want to be able to take the pieces that you've already written and use them in another notebook or another project altogether. All right. So think about pandas, think about matplotlib, think about those things. They're not just like one thing that you do one time and it's over. Those are distributed to a lot of people and they use a lot of these things. This is a big, big deal. Okay. We can help ourselves by implementing this, but software engineering principles only go so far in Jupyter Notebooks here. Also, we have standard techniques. So this is something that I really like to harp on with people when it comes to data science. Don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. This also goes with minimal complexity and ease of maintenance. If you're going to be working with data structures, like don't choose your data structure to be a list. Just use pandas so you can have all the functionality. Otherwise, you're going to be rewriting these basic mean and min and max and every single thing. You're going to have to rewrite it. Someone's going to have to understand it, and it's going to waste everyone's time. Don't do it. Just use, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Let's stand on it. We're going to use pandas. We're going to use SciPy, Matplotlib, and Seaborn. We're going to do it. Lastly, two related things is writing for humans, not computers. Just remember, again, with data science, the point is often to share it. If you write something really clever that makes no sense or takes a long time to understand, it's not going to help your collaborator. It's not going to help people who are less skilled understand. And also, this is also a big thing I harp on. Maybe other people don't care, but I do big time. I believe, and this was in the book, okay? So other people do care. The visual appearance of the code is helping to reflect the logic of the underlying code, okay? So what does that mean? If you have just a big slab of code, no, it's harder to understand that than if you have things kind of separated by white space, indented headers. So people like that kind of appearance will help you just mentally understand what's going on in the code, okay? All right, so let's see. Okay, so let's try this together. We're going to try together and see what it's like to maybe implement some of these software engineering principles. Okay, so let me stop sharing. Oops, stop share. I feel like everything always takes longer than I think it is. And so we're running a little bit behind from what I planned. So we might have to do just a little bit of skipping around. We might have to do a few things offline. But here I'm going to send you a link to a repo. And we talked about Google Collab. We did, right? And so this is a Google Collab notebook. You should be able to click on that badge. Oh, I guess I should show you because I can share my screen. It's a thing. Screen. I think this is the one. Okay. All right. Do you guys see the repo here? Yeah, I'm thinking so. Looking good. Okay, so now we just open in Collab. And this is going to help us learn about how we can try a bit to implement good software development practices. And again, I recommend that you take a class or you read a book on software development because it can help you a lot with your Jupyter Notebooks, okay? So again, if you're not very familiar with Python, if you're not very familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, you might just want to open up the solutions directly in order to kind of follow along, but otherwise we can code together a little bit. So if you're feeling like a little pair programming, then let's open up this one together. If you fall behind, again, feel free to open up the solutions and just follow along. All right, let's make it. I might need to make this a little bit bigger. So some people said that they're kind of used to Collab. Fantastic. So this is what a Jupyter Notebook looks like on Collab. It looks a little bit different in other places. So maybe just a little bit different. But you can see here that we have the ability to have markdown, so we can explain things to people in a very formatted way. Again, we talked about having headers, let things visually explain things to you. So again, we're running a little bit behind, and I want to make sure we get through this, but maybe we'll develop the first part together, and then you guys will be able to do the rest offline. Okay, so the first thing is about, again, using good software development practices. And the thing is, with Jupyter notebooks and with Python and with C, this can be a little bit nefarious, okay? So we're gonna do an example here, and then you can click these buttons here to run, okay? So just click these little arrows to run. We're gonna do a little example here about normalizing columns in a data set. And we are going to show how one can do it, but this is not how you would do this if you had pandas or you were using the actual functionality of pandas. This is for demonstrative purposes only, okay? So the first thing that we've done here is we're using pandas. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel, so we're already doing well. We're reading the CSV from this website. It's penguins. If you were here maybe a couple of weeks ago, you would know. It's just a penguins data set that I just happen to love. This is not doing anything in particular other than dropping NA rows and then resetting the index so that, you know, it's just sequential. So this is what the data looks like. All right, so we have some columns, we have some information here, but no NAs. Great. Okay. All right, so let's see. So maybe what our goal is here, okay? We want to learn how to normalize or standardize. There's so many people use like all these different like terms. Let me see. Okay, so I clicked this plus code button to make a new cell. Okay, so our goal is to write a function that will allow us to normalize a specific column. So maybe our goal first is to actually, maybe our goal first is to try this on one specific column. Okay, so that's not a bad approach, right? If you don't know how to do everything at one time, you try to do it yourself, right? And you do it on one thing. So let's try that. So let's say we try to get some column, mean, and standard deviation. Okay, can you guys see this? Let's make this a little bigger just in case you can. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're just going to try one column. So we're going to get the column mean, and we're going to do that. We're just going to find some column that we like. We're going to use, thank you, Collab. Wonderful. We're going to use bill length. We're going to get the mean of that one. Then we're going to get the standard deviation of that same column, right? Thank you. And then standard deviation. Great. We are almost there. All right. Oh, man, I don't use Collab as much as I use regular stuff. Okay. So then we can actually do the normalization or standardization, right? So we're going to do, and we're going to do a mutate. So we're going to make a new standardized/normalized column. Okay. So here we go. Data at bill length. Oops, sorry. Normed. So that's going to be our new column that we're going to make, right? And we're going to do our regular operation. So we're going to have the actual data. Okay, that's not the right one, but we were close. We're going to subtract the mean, which we calculated, and we're going to divide by the standard deviation, which we also calculated. Then we're just going to do a little head here, and we're just going to see if that's making sense. We're just going to, oh, look, it's there. So we can see that one, we have a new column, and it's looking like a pretty accurate calculation. They're different values, and okay, it's seeming like it's right. So you can verify whether it is right or not, but okay. So now, sorry, I don't actually use Collab that much. Okay, so here we go. So now we say to ourselves, all right, so we have learned how to do this on one column, and we want to do this on multiple columns. So we say, okay, our goal is to do reproducible research, right? We want to be modular. We want to be reusable. Let's make a function then. Perfect, that's a great idea. So we're going to make a new function, which is going to do exactly this. And we say to ourselves, we're going to do this quick. We're going to normalize, we're going to call it normalize calls. What do we need? Okay, we need the actual data. And we need the column name that we're going to be working on, right? Okay, so we're almost there. Okay, that's making sense. And then what are we going to do? Well, we do need to make sure that we make the new column name. So what we can do there is have this new column name, And it's going to be call name. And because this is just a string, we're just going to add a little bit more. So we're going to add a little bit more string to it. So we're going to get the new name. Okay, so that'll be the new name. Great. And then we actually need to do the operation. All right, well, this was our operation that we did, right? So let's just copy this one, copy paste. We're going to expedite our work. Okay, expedite. All right, we're going to, oh, I remember, okay, I need to make sure that I replace this because I'm using great software and engineering practices. Great, so we're replacing this one, we're replacing this one, okay. And then we need to make sure that we update the new column name, right? Great. And we need to use the old column name. Great. All right, fantastic. All right, well, we're almost there, okay? Then we subtract the mean and the standard deviation. And we want to return, okay? What do we want to return? This data here. Okay. Great. This is looking great. We can define this. Something that we also always want to pull from software development is writing test cases. So this would be like a unit test, sort of. I don't tend to write like overly rigorous unit tests in terms of like exploring all the avenues of code execution. I tend to write it in making sure that the answer is correct that's generated. But let's see. So let's do a little small unit test here. So we're going to make some variable out data. We're going to call our function normalize calls, right? And we're going to pass in the data that we had. Great. And maybe what we want to try this on is flipper length in millimeters. Okay. And then we're just going to type this out data. Okay, let's see what happens. What we expect to happen, let's formulate that. We expect that we're going to have a new, so flipper, okay, yeah, we're going to expect to have a new column named flipper length millimeter normed, and it's going to be something that looks pretty much like this, right? Okay, so let's see if that's what we actually get. Oh, so yes, perfect. Everything is working great. So we got flipper length millimeter normed. Wonderful. But now we look at this with our eyeballs and we say, something is wrong with these numbers. Because when you subtract off the mean and you divide by the standard deviation, it's not usual that you get values this large. So now you start looking at your code and you're upset because you don't know what's wrong with it. You feel like you did all the wrong things. Okay. In the interest of time, we were going to go into breakout rooms. Actually, let me look at the time that we have left. I had planned to be, oh no, I think we have time, right? We have time, about 10 minutes. Yeah, we can go into a breakout room. Yes, we're going into a breakout room, okay? And let's see, okay, this is what's gonna happen in the breakout room. Okay, we're going to have 10 minutes. And we are going to look at this. And we are going to look at this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to decide if it's right or wrong. Do we think that this right here is right? Or do we think that that right there is wrong? If we think that it is wrong, what software engineering principles have we violated? And what has been their effect in this function? Okay. That is what our goal is. So again, we're looking at this column. Because we had a test case. We wanted to make sure it was working correctly. Good thing, right? Maybe. We're looking at this. Does it look right? We're going to look at it. Does it look right? Not sure. You guys will decide that in your breakout rooms. And then if it's not right, we're going to look at this function and we're going to analyze and state what we have violated that is making this wrong, how it impacted the results, and if you have time, how we can fix it. Okay? If you're not great at Python, if you're not great at Pandas, you can truly feel free to go and look at the solutions and discuss the solutions themselves. But when we come back, we're going to have 5 minutes and we're going to discuss this as well. So we will pop into the breakout rooms and let us know if you have any problems or need our help.
And do you want to have 10 minutes or do you want to have a shorter time?
Let's see. Sorry, maybe. Oh, actually, yeah, let's do 5. I think we're
okay.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Aaron, I'm going to go ahead and put you into room 2. Bright, I'm going to go and also put you in room 2. Jonathan, I'll go and put you in room 1. Lisa, I'm going to go and put you in room 1. And Mohammed, I'm going to put you into room 3. Jonathan, I will put you into room 1. Hello, Aaron. Do you need help getting back into another room? Hi there.
Hi. All right, I think things are going in a timely manner, hopefully. Hopefully it's as helpful for people. I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Great. Are you going to, let's see. Oh, great. And so at 12:40, you're going to hit MB Dev.
Yes.
Cool. I think it'll be great.
But what pains me about it is that it's like, so it's hard to do without being local. Like it's not something you can actually do on Collab without great effort.
Oh, interesting.
Unfortunately.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so I didn't want to go through all of those steps. So
Are you just going to, but you're just going to show what it looks like local? Because a lot of people work on it local.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's worthwhile.
Okay.
And this is about 1:20. And some very nice comments early on.
Yeah, we did.
We like the presentation style. We like it. That was great. You're right.
Page 1 line like deploy.
All right, rooms are closing. believe we're all back.
All right, fantastic. So does anyone want to quickly identify any issues that they found and what the impact was? Does anyone have any ideas there? Oh, Daniela, perfect. Call mean and call standard. So the standard deviation were both set previously. So this is one of the things about many languages, but also about Jupyter notebooks that can present some issues. So we need to always be cognizant of things that we've defined in the kernel and the fact that we're able to actually use them within functions without passing them in. So the way that we can do that is to just make sure that we redefine them within the function. Also, there's a package that we're going to talk about in just a second that is so helpful for this in a very side way, not in a direct way, but in a side way. So great. Anyone else? And again, feel free to stick it in the chat or just unmute and say just that. Okay, global, okay, good. Sit. So these things sit in the kernel and we're able to use them in our functions, even though they really shouldn't be defined in the scope of the function. All right, great point. All right, well, let me go ahead and share my screen. And I'm just going to go straight to the solutions here. So you guys can take a look at that with me as well if you like. But the problems that I identified, okay? And I would like to say, if you found other issues, I'm very interested to hear what they are, because I always like to learn about things that I have missed. But the first thing is exactly what Daniela said. The first problem is that we have used values in the kernel. Sorry, I'm going to scroll up a little bit. So this and this, these are in the kernel, but they're not defined in the function. So let's think about that. If this was its own script somewhere else, and we were to now just use this function, it would tell us, what's column mean? What's column standard deviation? I don't know. So this is not actually reusable. It's actually not modular, and it actually is a very, very tight coupling. And not only that, it's also incorrect because this is not the functionality that we want. A lot of things wrong here with that. So number one, we don't want that behavior, and it's something that we have to be cognizant about. And so what we can do to resolve that is do something like this. This kind of solves it. It's totally fine if you just want to redefine those within your function, right? And these will maintain the scope, and then you can use them here. Also, what you could have done is just use these directly here, right? Instead of even saying column mean, instead of saying column standard deviation, you could have just written exactly that right there, okay? All right, so when we execute this new thing, right, and we have to make sure that we do execute this new function, we would see in our test case, because we like to look at test cases to make sure that things are working correctly, we see some values that are looking a little bit more reasonable. So this is another point, just again, make sure when you do an analysis, you test, you look at the result and you have a test case to look at, all right? So here's another point that is actually a consequence of like the way things are implemented in Python and Pandas and with things that are like passed by like reference. And that problem is that we're actually modifying the underlying data frame itself. So this is very easy to overlook, especially because we've really written everything right here, right? So our original data is called data, but we have this dummy variable called input data, and this is the one that we always operate on. And then we return input data, and that's fine. But we might also think that if this was something more like a copy, so if a copy had been made here, and like in other languages, some other languages, we would also return here as a copy. So you have to know the behavior of your language. The behavior of this language, and especially this package, is that if you do something like this, sorry, I keep scrolling up and down. So we pass in this data frame, we modify it. So we added the new column and then we output it. Even if we have like something else that we assign it to, this is actually a reference to the same variable, right? Because it's a reference. So the way that we can test that is if we can test the name of this variable, and we can see if its identity is equivalent to that of the original data frame, and it is. We can additionally see that the IDs associated with them, so I think these are their actual addresses, they're identical. So that could be something we want, or that could be something we don't want. If you have huge data frames, and you know exactly that that's something that you want, that could be amazing functionality. So now you're making no copies, none. You're just working in memory, which is wonderful. Quick. If you didn't want that, there's other things that you can do. So you take the kind of inverse Java approach and you get the input data and you make a copy, start working on that one and return that one. Okay, so if you do that, so we run this, we put this in the kernel, redefine normalized calls, run our test case again, we can see that we get the behavior that we want. But we do see that these are two different actual like references now. So these are two different objects. We can see this by is, and we can see this by the addresses themselves. Another thing that you can do if you really actually don't care about the data frame itself, or you want to be like 1000% sure, is just return the column. Just return the column information, right? So now, so if you remember, this used to modify a column and it used to mutate a column on. Instead, what we can do is just return a series. So we're going to return the series instead. We return a series, and that's what we get. We get just that one column, right? And so you can see that it's not this, and they have two different addresses. Okay. So those are some things to be cognizant of. You have to know your language and how it's behaving. You also have to know some things about your package and how it's behaving. You have to be very cognizant about not using things that are defined in your kernel. So this hidden state that you're unable to kind of inspect because there's no variable explorer. You have to make sure that you're not using that in your functions. So there's lots of things that you have to think about that you can be helped by if you use regular software engineering approaches. So what questions do you have about that? All right, so now we have talked about some parts here about how some things that can be helped by software engineering. Let me share my screen a little bit more. Okay. Okay, can you guys see this? I think you can. This should be a PowerPoint presentation, right? All right, hold on. Let me just see if someone is going to link. Yes, yes. Oh, okay. I'm about to butcher your name. Sorry. Manawar, sorry. You have a really great point. Okay. And yes, Steve, yes. But you have a really great point that we're actually going to talk about now. Okay, so we were talking about software engineering just then, right? And we were talking about how software engineering approaches can help us with specifically these things. So we're going to kind of help us not use these global variables. It's going to help us to kind of avoid, to help us to make more functions and more modular, reusable, loosely coupled things. We're not going to care about this. Not care. We're not going to not care. We're going to be able to remedy our out of order execution and be able to remedy our reproducibility issues by just restarting the kernel and let it run from top to bottom. We can do those things by our own power and that are kind of independent of Jupyter notebooks. Okay, but there are other things that we really need help with big time. Okay, so our own accord and our own power is only going to take us so far. Sometimes we need help, and we need help for these two specific things big time. Okay, so this is something we need help for. This Jupyter will not be able to, we can't do it. So this right here is something we talked about a second ago. So I made that function normalize calls, but how do I, you have to normalize calls in a bunch of projects, or you have to normalize calls for a bunch of different maybe data pieces that you're working on. Okay, how do we get that with Jupyter notebooks, and how do we get to modularity? So we did kind of discuss how we get to modularity, but how do we get to reusability? And on top of that, how do we get to collaboration? This is the big one. This is a struggle. Okay, how do we get there? So there's a package that everyone needs to know, and we all need to just come to terms with the fact that we need to use it. They actually just need to go ahead and just put it right into the Jupyter and IPython, like it needs to go in. It needs to not even be a separate package anymore. It's called NBDev. Okay, NBDev. I love NBDev. And what's funny is the other day we had a presentation by one of our researchers that we collaborate with, and he's very versed in Python, but maybe not so much, maybe unfamiliar with Jupyter notebooks. And so we introduced him to Jupyter notebooks, and the other day he was giving a presentation and he was saying, I use Jupyter notebooks, but I don't really know that I can use Jupyter notebooks anymore without using NBDev. And I truly feel the same way. The second lesson then is to use the NBDev package. Why? Okay, so let me tell you many things about NBDev. We are not going to try this together. If you do want to try this together, I am happy to actually walk you through how to use NBDev. It's just very hard to do using Collab, and you need to use like your own Anaconda installation, do it locally. And I don't think we would have time for that today. But if you do want to see this, send us an email and we might just go ahead and make a workshop for that specific thing. But what is NBDev doing that is making me so happy? So the first thing is, by the command line or in the notebook, it will automatically create modules for you. Okay, so just imagine if we were to run that notebook that we just had, but after we ran it, that actual function that we had written came out and it came into its own module. And then in another notebook, we could import that function that we had written into the notebook, like how you import regular modules. Oh, that sounds amazing. That's NBDev. I cannot wait to show you an example. Okay. The second thing is, okay, so it goes the other way around as well. So if you were to change things in your editor, they could also be repopulated back into your notebook, which is fantastic. So you edit kind of the script and it updates your notebook. Something also absolutely wonderful is using just the Jupyter notebooks. Keep in mind, this is only using the Jupyter notebooks and this additional package, right? You can create documentation from your Jupyter notebooks themselves that is searchable, it's hyperlinked, it shows all of the work that you have done, and you can select which cells that it showed, okay? So it's fantastic in that respect. So think about this, just think about it. Just think about how great this is. You have a Jupyter notebook that you would have developed anyways, right? You developed it anyways because you needed to do that. But on top of that, you're able to now create a module, shorten up your notebooks because you can take what you developed in that first notebook and use it for additional analyses in your later shorter notebooks. Wonderful. 2, not from this original notebook, this one thing that you had to create anyways, you have documentation, okay? And it can be documentation through something on GitHub called Github Pages. So you use like this github.io and you use this functions of NBDev and you go to your repo page and it shows from your Jupyter notebook actual documentation about the work that you've done in your analyses. So it's killing like all these birds with one stone. Ooh, that was dark. But we are reaching multiple objectives using this one approach, okay? This one notebook and this one modality. In addition, lots of pip and conda installers. On top of that, you can run these automated tests. So if you're kind of developing something that is, it's both an analysis, but it's also just a little bit of a framework. And so it's something that you're iterating through, but you need to be like, you need it to be consistent in its output. We talked about unit tests a second ago. You can also run unit tests through GitHub on your code. And it does continuous integration with these tests. And you can, okay, so I'm sorry, I'm getting way too excited because it's so great. So basically on GitHub, what you can do is once you upload your code, you can run these actions that allow you to run tests on your functions to make sure that they're behaving correctly. On top of that, they run in parallel, so it doesn't take forever. And then on top of that, when you go and do your pull request reviews, like it will tell you if there's something wrong with like the test that it failed, or maybe you didn't clean your notebooks, or all these different things. The last thing that makes it absolutely wonderful is the conflict handling. So a second ago, we talked about when you go and you try to collaborate people and you collaborate with people and you try to merge things. If you try to like, if you get a conflict literally in your own notebook and you try to merge them, it'll break the notebook. Okay. NBDev has this thing that you run at the command line, NBDev fix merge. What it does is it takes those little, you know, the little merge conflict arrows, it takes them and it moves them into the markdown, right? So now you see the actual errors around the cells, right? Instead of in the notebook, because you wouldn't actually be able to see them in the JSON of the notebook, okay? It's very exciting, very exciting. So let me just show you quickly an example of how this has worked big time for us. And again, I am so sorry because this is running a really long time, but let me just show you very quickly. All right, let me share the screen. So the most important thing that you learned today, it really is that NBDev, it will make your life so good, so good. So for example, this is a repo for one of our projects called Legal Case Classifier. We're trying to classify legal documents now based on 55 different variables. Okay, so just think about that. We have this analysis that we need to run on 55 different variables. So can you imagine one notebook, long notebook with 55 analyses in it? Awful. I could not, I would just quit. I just couldn't do it. I could not scroll that long. It would be awful. So NBDev it came right at the right time and it helped us out. So for example, this right here is creating a model of one specific variable, right? So now we are doing these things, we're doing our modeling. If you look at this, this is actually a class. So we're using reusability, right? We're trying to modularize things. So we have fantastic class that one of our students wrote. We have lots of classes that we're going to use. And we actually do, sorry, we're going to get there. This is actually a lot of scrolling too. It's not wrong. There's a lot of scrolling there, but it's just this one. Okay, that's neither here nor there. But now you can see how this is working, how the code is working on this one particular model, right? So we're training things and we show how that works. We do our prediction result. And keep in mind, we actually could have done this in another notebook as well. We just didn't happen to. We are looking at calibration curves. We're looking at outputs, okay? So we do that on one variable. However, that framework of work, that code needs to be repeated like 55 times on 55 different variables. So here's the beauty of that, right? So this is another variable. You remember the length of that notebook. What we do is we use NBDev and we compile that into different modules of our package. So this will be our package. And these are actual different modules that we have. So you see, this is actually the name of what we were just looking at, ULM Fit Pipeline. And it has all the functionality that we developed there. And so now instead of essentially pasting that entire like notebook here, we import the module like you import normal modules, and we use all the functionality directly. So let's just look at that right quick, right? So we had that function called classification model. We generate a classification model, and then we use one of those functions that we wrote, create classifier, right? Look at how much shorter this is, okay? It's because we're just using the functionality and we're doing the analysis and it's done, right? So this is what NBDev can help us with. We have many notebooks that look just like this, but the reason they're not the length of the original and the reason that they don't have a lot of code in them, like if you look at this, it's not mostly code, it's mostly result, right? Result, like this is the code. This is the results code, results code, results, like so much of it is results. When your collaborators look at this, they're able to actually understand, okay, what the actual results are, as opposed to having to look at the code all the time. This is wonderful. So let me just give you a view of what the actual, so you can't see this. So we're gonna get there. So again, we did not really struggle to make this. So look, you can see what it says. It's auto-generated, don't edit it, okay? NBDev did this for us. We literally wrote one line, NBDev build lib, the end. And then it made this for us, okay? So it put all of our functionality out of that one notebook where we did that first analysis, just the first one, into this Python script. And then we're able to use that module and import it into others, okay? So that is absolutely fantastic. Not only is that just fantastic, period, but it's the fact that a lot of people use scripts. Like they use scripts alone to do their analysis. Why use the scripts alone anymore? Because you can have NBDev generate the scripts for you and have all of the things offered by Jupyter Notebooks. You can have explanation, you can have pictures, you can have discussion, you can have other people work with you. Like you have all of this functionality, but at the end, you can still have these scripts and distribute a module. So I'm obsessed with this. It's really great. I love that you guys have asked for this workshop because I would love to give it. I could talk about NBDev for like the next 10 years. However, I'm going to spare you that. In these last few minutes here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of barrel through this last piece. The last thing is, after the awesomeness of NBDev, there's one last piece, right? And it's this, right? It's the line by line execution. the lack of the debugger, the lack of a variable explorer, and the fact that you actually can't like pause or like use the variables in the kernel to like investigate them. And again, it's still the same thing here. And that drives me to madness. And so recently there's been a new Python debugger created. So it's a new kernel and it allows you to do line by line execution via debugger. And so this is something that's really helpful in terms of being able to teach people what the behavior of these different Python lines are. But something also awesome is Jupyter Lab itself, which would allow you to attach multiple notebooks or a REPL, so like a console, directly to a kernel that's already running. So now you get a lot of the same functionality that you get with IDEs by just using Jupyter Lab. And so that's the last piece. So we're not going to get to that today, but in the actual repo that I provided, it has a link to the debugger and you can kind of experience it. It looks like this. So here it looks like a regular debugger. You can see that we added a breakpoint and it stops on the breakpoint. From there, we're able to go from line to line. We're able to look at the variables. And that is just really great functionality. I've also been told that other people use PyCharm, and I think Visual Studio Code, but don't quote me on that, which also has Jupyter Notebook functionality that will enable you to use a debugger as well as like a variable explorer as well. So I will be looking soon into using PyCharm for that, but apparently there is some consternation about the price. Anyways, we'll look more into that. But you can still do it alone with Jupyter Lab using this kernel backend. So lastly, like I love Jupyter Notebooks now. Like I do have a little bit of consternation. My stack is NBDev with Jupyter Lab and something called ReviewNB. ReviewNB allows you to, on GitHub, instead of looking at just the JSON, it allows you to look at the actual rendered IPython notebook in terms of reviewing pull requests. So you're able to look at a particular cell and comment on it, which has been great for our workflow. I won't pretend that, the relationship that I have with Jupyter Notebooks is all like sunshine and flowers. Like we still have words and it's about this. The debugger isn't currently my favorite in Jupyter Lab. And I really passionately love debuggers and I really love running things cell by cell. And I really love variable explorers. I like to know that what I'm doing is correct. And those things are very important to me. So I still have words here with Jupyter. But I think I will end up exploring a little bit more about PyCharm to kind of, ameliorate those issues. But even with that, I still really love so many of the advantages conferred by Jupyter Notebooks. I love being able to have the literate programming and allowing the explanation. I love to be able to tell a story through Jupyter Notebooks and give it to a collaborator and they read it like it's a book with pictures. I also really love that the pictures are in the analysis. They're right there. The visualization, when you put it on GitHub, it's right there for the collaborator to look at. It's right there for you to look at. It's right there for your stakeholders to look at. And I also like that they're able to structure it visually so that it enables you to digest what you're looking at a lot easier. So thank you for coming. I know that we're right here at the end of our time. But thank you so much for attending this workshop. It's been great having you here, great interacting with you. We will let you know about this NBDev workshop because I am excited to talk more about sharing the power of that particular package. Our next workshop is going to be on sharing your data science work using Streamlit and Shiny, and we will reach out regarding the NBDev workshop as well. So let's see. So I know this is right at the end of our time, but what questions do you have for me about Jupyter Notebooks? Any weird issues you run into? Anything you wanna chat about in particular? All right, it looks like we're pretty quiet. All right, fantastic. Great. Oh wait, someone said Anaconda versus Collab. So now I'm hesitant to talk about that since everyone, championed Collab so much. I have also had unfortunate words with Collab, mostly because I love GitHub repos. and the way that you have to do it with Collab, as far as I understand. So please feel free to correct my understanding. I would love to learn more. Is that you have to use it with like a drive, and I don't really love that very much. And I find that a little bit hard to work with when it comes to sharing things. But that could just be me. And if you have really great workflows around using GitHub with Collab, please let me know. Like, I'm dying to know, please let me know. Let's see, yeah. Is there a way to make importing multiple files and folders using books easier? Yes, I think that sounds like a question about packages. Something that I use at length is a package called Grob. I think it's called Grob. Grob or Glob? Grob?
Glob.
Yeah, and so it allows you to look at a file directory and just pull out a lot of the different files that match a particular pattern. So I like that one. I like that one a lot. I think that helps to load files a lot easier. Yeah.
All right.
All right, great. Well, thank you all for coming. Please feel free to shoot me an email if you want to chat, and we'll let you know about the MBDev workshop.